everybody, welcome back to Gideon Stuff. Today we have a review that I'm really excited for. This is the Boker Knives Elso. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get this review started with, the thing that we always start with, a blade length measurement. So here we have, actually, you know what, let's actually measure the sharpened edge. So to do this, you can actually basically roll the knife along next to your ruler to get an accurate length. I mean, if we just measure it like this, you'll see here that we're coming in, whoops, a little bit over 3 1/4 inches. Let's see what it really is. Get down here where you guys can kind of see. I'm still going to be off screen, but that's okay. Almost, just shy of 3 3/4 inches of sharpened edge because we have this massive belly. But as far as the blade length goes, just overall blade length, we're going to call that, 3.3 inches. So not a small knife, but not a ginormous knife either. Size comparison time. Here's the R2-D2. Here is the Rat 1. Yeah, not a huge knife, but not a small knife either. Let's go ahead and grab our USA made comparisons. There is the Benchmade bug out, almost called it the Boker bug out. And here's the Spyderco PM2. Very similar in overall length to the Spyderco PM2, but significantly thinner. A little bit different on this dimension, huh? Yeah. Let's bring out the Civivis. There's our Elementum, or the Elementum 2 in this case. And here is the Praxis. Cool. Let's compare it against one of my other favorite folding Bowie knives. Here is the Tucson TS301. And actually, let's compare it against the only other Boker I've ever reviewed. This is the Boker Bonfire. Cool. All right, so what are we looking at for our specs? Well, I just knocked a whole bunch of knives over off screen. So we have an aggressive, I don't know. Actually, you know what? We'll call this it's a trailing point blade. You want to call it a Bowie blade. You want to call it a Persian. I kind of lean more Bowie just with the overall aesthetics of this knife. We have a trailing point blade of D2 steel, flat grind. We have G10 scales, and this is a steel bolster lock with a steel pocket clip and a steel backspacer. The knife is running on bearings. Let's go cut some stuff. Hey guys, you ready to do some review cutting? The answer better be yes. Today we're taking a look at the Boker Elso. Again, we are still using Janelle's car while my truck is in the shop, so pardon the bad shadows and such. I wish I could arrange myself to where that wouldn't be such an issue, but it's going to be an issue, unfortunately. So, Boker Elso, you'll get plenty of good looks at it at the table. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's start off the action. Blade hole only deployment. It's kind of an interesting blade hole. We've got a weird shape here. Part of it's hidden by the lock bar on the one side, but it works surprisingly well. Thumb flick is very natural, and reverse flick, a little less natural, but it still, is good. If you're left-handed, the reverse flick, if I get off the lock bar, the reverse flick might actually be a little bit better than the thumb flick, but you can do both. My flubbing it is just because I am not left-handed. But the action is very good. It's running on bearings, very nice and smooth. Again, that thumb flick is really nice. The hole is positioned excellently. So, love to see that. Just real good design on Boker's part. Let's go ahead and talk about the ergonomics. Very kind of plain Jane ergos. There's not, a whole lot going on here. There's no grooves or choils or anything. What you see is what you get. And you know what? What you get is a pretty comfortable knife. It's slim. This is a very thin knife, but it feels really good in the hand. I think large variety of hand sizes are going to be comfortable on this. I don't have the biggest hands. You can see how much room I've got left over though. And even if you've got smaller hands than mine, you should be able to hold on to this pretty well. Even though it is pretty slim, it's fairly tall, so it does still fill out the hand. There's no real hot spots. It is all flat scaled, so it's not going to be like hand melting ergos like you might get from something that's contoured, but it works really, really well. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the carry. So we have a milled steel clip. Let's go ahead and adjust this a little bit. Hey, look, you guys might be able to see the knife a little bit better now. Maybe, sort of, kind of. Anyways, you got a milled steel clip. It is pretty tight. You can see we've got an aggressive little point under there. Wait for the wind to settle. In the pocket, a little bit grabby on jeans. A little bit grabby. Actually, a little bit grabby might be generous. Something just blew out. Let me go grab that. Remember, guys, don't litter. You're better than that. It's pretty grabby. The retention's great. I mean, this knife is going to stay in your pocket, that's for sure. The knife folds up into a very nice profile. This kind of disappears in the pocket. It's a little bit heavy for its size, but because of its profile, it carries like a knife that's a lot lighter. You know, you can get your hand down in there and, you know, keep other things in your pocket, and it's not going to bother you too bad. You don't have a flipper tab or anything sticking out. So the carry profile is actually pretty appealing, but the clip is a little bit too tight. The texture on the G10 isn't enough to make it like a true pocket shredder, but it does make, you know, getting the knife in and out of the pocket just a little bit more difficult than it has to be. All right, shall we cut some stuff? We have a pretty much fully flat ground trailing point blade here of D2 steel. Performed pretty well through my use with it. I've actually still got some gunk on there. But let's go ahead and start cutting some stuff, because that's what everyone wants to see, right? Okay, let's figure out how. I miss my truck, guys. I need to get my truck up and running. We're working on it. It's almost there. It's almost there. Just has to, you know, have some service done. Okay. You know what? I think you guys can see at least decently well. Let's go ahead and start off with cardboard, as we always do. You guys know how this works. And I've got a big old thing of cardboard here. Let's go ahead and start off by just cutting this little thing off. And actually, I just found this piece of cardboard. Let's use this one, too. That trailing point blade gives you a lot of sharpened edge, but it's not, you know, the greatest for utility cuts. You can do it. I mean, you can get down to that tip if your table is low enough, but, you know, it's not going to be the world's best utility cutter. Still, though, as you can see there, you can do it. Very, very powerful on cuts where you're like pushing down onto this belly area. If you've got like a zip tie or something you want to crunch down on, it's going to be great on that. I imagine it's going to do good on the rope test. Speaking of which, where is my rope? Ah, it's up front. Pardon me. Rope acquired. It's been a while since I've done a review cutting, guys. All right, that felt okay. A little bit of a struggle, but not too bad. Let's go ahead and do some crunches. 1, 2, 3. Might as well just keep going. Yeah, that is excellent. That belly has so much power. You don't have to put in much energy to crunch down on that rope really, really effectively. So very, very cool. Okay, pool noodle time. Still got a little bit of this blue one left, so let's go ahead and use that. 1, 2, 3. Missed a little bit there at the bottom. Ah! Don't blow away on me. Okay, so yeah, that felt very consistent all the way through. I didn't catch or hang up on anything. This was from a previous knife. This was the first cut that we did. And we were able to go decently thin. I actually might have been able to go a little bit thinner than this. But yeah, no hang-ups, no binding. Cut cleanly through the whole way. Very well done on the grind. All right, give you guys a little look at that guy. Let's get back to the table. Alrighty, guys. Let's talk about what I'm liking and not liking about this very interesting knife. Number one, I love the aesthetics of this knife. I think this is a really, really cool looking knife. This is very classy. Garbage truck just went by. Ooh, and again, actually those were fire trucks. My bad. Very classy looking knife. I think the designer absolutely hit it out of the ballpark with this one. I can't speak today, guys. Whatever. There's a maker's mark right there. The designer is actually Cornel Kiss, my bad, who is a Hungarian knife designer who has done a lot of collaborations with Boker on some very interesting knives. And by the way, the name Elso is Hungarian for first, which I thought was pretty cool. And I'm assuming that's where the name comes from, seeing as how Cornel Kiss, I'm not sure why I want to call him Cornel Chris. I don't know. Cornel Kiss is Hungarian, so I'm assuming that that's what he was going for here. Maybe this is his first design collaboration with Boker. Maybe this is his first design ever. I'm not exactly sure. But regardless, I think it's a really sexy design. I love how this knife flows. This is right up my alley aesthetically. If you guys are still wondering what kind of knives is Gideon like, this right here is about as sexy as it gets in my mind. I absolutely love this knife. We got the bolster lock. We got the kind of Bowie style blade. We've got a kind of pistol grip shape. I really, really love that kind of aesthetic. I love it ergonomically too, but I love that aesthetic. And I also love two-tone or multi-tone handles. And so I really like the dark gray and black motif going on here. Just a really, really cool design, in my opinion. All right, let's go ahead and move on from that. Next thing, I like the action a lot. This is a very, very smooth knife. And, excuse me right there. Of course, as soon as you start talking about the action, I was hesitant about this blade hole at first. I'm not going to lie. But it actually works a lot better than I was expecting. You can get your thumb in there really, really well. I mean, it's kind of an odd shape, like a little smiley face almost. But it works. Man, it works. And then if you want to do a slow roll, it works for that too. Reverse flick. Whoops. It does work. It's a little bit awkward to get your finger in there because on this side it's covered up a little bit by the frame. But if you're a lefty, that reverse flick is pretty darn good. Yeah, great action. Very, very smooth. It has broken in wonderfully. In fact, this had one of the fastest break-in times of any knife I have ever reviewed, which was pretty cool. Out of the box, it was a little bit like stiff and crunchy, and it broke in just like really ridiculously fast, which is kind of cool. Great access to the lock bar. Do you want to highlight that as well? We've got a good cutout here, and the lock bar itself is kind of plain. There's no texturing or anything on there, but the tension's just about right. And honestly, it doesn't bother me that much at all. So yeah. Next up, the ergonomics. I do like the ergos on this a lot. This is a very thin knife, which obviously brings, ergonomics into question sometimes, but it's wide enough in this dimension that it fills out the hand really, really nicely. The ergos are kind of blocky and square. You can see here we've got like sharp corners, but surprisingly, it doesn't feel that way in hand. There's no contouring going on here, but the knife doesn't feel angular. It feels not necessarily soft in the hand, but it does feel chamfered and well shaped, which I always appreciate. The ergos are pretty neutral. These are going to work for a wide variety of hand sizes. Yeah. Again, because of the thinness, if you're really bearing down on this, you're going to get a couple of hot spots, but honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think the ergos actually pair really, really well with this blade. So let's go ahead and talk about this blade. Pretty much a full flat grind here, D2 steel. Trailing points are not typically my first choice for EDC. I love the aesthetics of this knife. Don't get me wrong, I love the aesthetics, but an upswept tip like this is not typically my first choice for EDC. But while I was using this knife, I had a blast. There's a lot of things that this kind of blade shape actually does very well. Of course, when you think of a trailing point, your mind automatically goes to hunting or maybe self-defense or things like that. But this was actually a pretty solid EDC knife. Is it going to be, the best EDC blade shape out there? No, there's definitely, blade shapes that are much more optimized for EDC. But I did enjoy using this knife. It slices very, very well. Very, thin geometry. That full flat grind on a broad blade is going to be excellent at destroying cardboard. We have an amazing sharpening choil here, which I love to see. The D2 seemed to hold up pretty well. You can actually see some discoloration here, just because I did take this knife hiking with me several times and had to clean it up and stuff. In fact, there's a little bit of rust right there, but that is D2. The stonewash on the blade is pretty cool. I'm a big fan of stonewash finishes. I've seen better than this, but I do like the stonewash finish. It does protect against rust a little bit, but it also helps hide wear and tear as you use the knife. Cuts that involve like rolling, like if you're going to do like crunching down on zip ties or something, I found this to be really, really adept at. Again, just small random cuts, really not a huge problem. The tip did feel a little bit out there, a little bit, inaccessible, but not so bad. This is not the most aggressive trailing point that you'll ever see. There are definitely a lot that are way worse than this. That tip is a little bit awkward, and utility cuts, are not going to be the nicest, but for like blister packs and stuff, I'm still able to kind of puncture and, cut fairly well for things like that. So overall, I really did enjoy using this knife, maybe even a little bit more than I expected. Again, I must reiterate, is this going to be my go-to blade shape from here on out? No, absolutely not. But I was impressed that this knife was still very usable in a lot of EDC scenarios. Yeah, I like that a whole bunch. The D2, again, did seem to hold up pretty well, which is important because I think that's going to be a feature that a lot of people focus on. But we'll talk about that more later. Carrying the knife is really nice. This knife has some heft to it, which I don't really mind. It's like good heft. Very slim, disappears in the pocket. We'll talk more about the carry in a little bit. Pocket clip disappears in the hand. That's one of the things that makes the ergos feel really, really good, is I do not even notice that the clip is there. Yeah, just feels pretty solid. Well-built knife. I do like that back here on the pivot, we've got options for a Torx or a flathead. Just makes adjusting the pivot really, really nice and easy. And in fact, I was going to say I'll adjust it right now, but actually I don't need to. There's no blade play, so we won't do that. But yeah, also I do like, I talked about this already, but I do like the bolster lock, not just for aesthetics, but also because I think it's just a classy way to do a frame lock, and especially on a budget knife like this. Having this G10 over here acts as an over travel stop. Sometimes budget frame locks don't always have that, right? So that's kind of nice. It's also just classy. The inlay work on the G10 and everything is very nicely done. The texturing on the G10 is nicely done. Everything is where you would expect it and want it to be, which I really, really appreciate. Good size stop pin for this knife. Yeah, overall, good build quality on a very, very interesting knife design. All right, let's go ahead and move on to some of the things that I do not like. The pocket clip. I am not a huge fan of this clip. It's great in the hand. It's very, very grabby in and out of the pocket. You can see there, look, it's just a sharp triangle there. Very, very grabby, very tight, and it's not reversible. Sorry, lefties. The pocket clip was my biggest disappointment with carrying this knife. However, and I haven't tested this yet, but the hole spacing here looks like you could swap this out for a Civivi clip, which I think I've got a titanium Civivi clip around somewhere, but this probably, obviously it fit the standard clips too. So that might be something that, if it bothers me that much, I can swap. I do like the aesthetics of the clip. It's very plain, but yeah, just in and out of the pocket, it was not real great. Next thing, I could have, I would have liked some jimping up here. Not the end of the world, but I think it would have been cool. Also a little bit of a smooth spot, a little bit of flat spot. I mentioned briefly that if you are really bearing down on this knife, it is possible to get a couple of hot spots, but I don't really think that's a huge deal. So kind of, I guess, forget that I even mentioned it as a negative. One negative is I think that as you sharpen this knife, that tip could start to become a little bit of a problem if you're not careful. Right now, I can't really get to the tip. I can touch it, but I can't really poke myself on it. But if you're not careful with sharpening, you might end up to a point where, you've got a little bit of that edge sticking out there, which could be a little bit hazardous. So just be careful about that. If you put this knife through multiple sharpenings. The next thing to talk about, I think this is going to be the big one. Let's talk about the price. I got mine on sale for $60, which I think is actually a really good price for this knife. Currently, you can find them on Blade HQ for about $90. I've seen these going for anywhere around $110 to $120 on different sites. Is it worth that? G10 steel and D2? I don't really think so. The build quality on this knife is very, very nice. I would say that it's a step up from, some other budget knives out there, but the price is a little bit steep. Now, the $90 price is a little more understandable. Like for $90, it's it's not value, but the $60 price I bought this knife at, I think, is an absolute steal, to be completely honest. But yeah, I think that price is going to turn a lot of people off. In fact, it was turning me off. I've had my eye on this knife for a long time. Always want to get this knife in hand, but that price tag just was nasty. And then once I saw that it was on sale, I decided I was going to go ahead and scoop it up. And I'm glad I did. I'm really glad I did. I do love this knife a lot. The design, I think, is really, really cool. But yeah, that price is going to be a little bit of a sore spot for a lot of people. All right, so let's go ahead and get on to my final conclusions. I like this knife. I like this knife a lot. Yeah, I like the aesthetic of it, but I appreciate the build quality. I'm a huge fan of budget frame locks. I know a lot of people aren't, but I like budgety steel frame locks. This is my first budgety steel bolster lock. I think it's pretty cool. I do like the build quality on this knife. It stands out in my collection. But I would not say that this is the greatest knife ever made, right? This is not something that I would recommend to most people, I think, as their first EDC knife. The blade shape is, again, I think there's better blade shapes for just general purpose EDC. The pocket clip's a little bit of an issue. And the price is kind of ugly. So when we take all of these things into consideration, do I recommend this knife? I do. If you're a collector, this is a really cool knife, especially if you're like me and you love folding Bowie knives. I know in the comments, is it even a Bowie knife anymore if it's folding? I don't know. But if you love this kind of aesthetic of knife, this definitely has a place in your collection, and I don't think you'll be disappointed with it, especially if you find it on sale for a good price. If you're just looking for your next EDC knife, maybe this is not what you're looking for. I could give you 100 other options that you would be better off spending your money on. First, getting more value and getting a little bit more utility. But I love this knife personally. So does this get a Gideon recommendation? Yes. This is one of those kind of yeses. It's a half yes. It's a conditional yes. We'll say that. I do not recommend this to people just looking for an EDC knife, but if you're wanting to try out something cool, if you're a collector, if you're an enthusiast, if you're just, someone who's wanting to experience something a little bit different, this is a pretty cool knife, especially if you can find it for a decent price. So that's about all I have to say on that. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Big shout out to my channel members at the cowboy level. I appreciate everything you do for the channel. If you want to become a member and support me directly, there's a link down below. As for the rest of you hooligans, if you enjoyed this video, leave it a like, comment below, and subscribe. I've been Gideon, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.